Oh, yes. We have finally made it to episode 1 of Dinged Corners. I had a ton of fun collabing with Rob over at Sports Card Therapist. This is a 3-part series, so there will be one video that comes out each week. The first one today, and then over the next couple weeks, there will be more, and then maybe more after that. We will see how this goes, but it was a lot of fun getting to know Rob better. I'm going to hang out with him at the National and some of these upcoming shows, so definitely check out Rob, Sports Card Therapist on YouTube. He's Sports Card Therapist on all the major podcasts platforms as well, so definitely check him out. I also have to say thank you to today's video sponsor, Drip Marketplace, live streaming platform that is a ton of fun. Check it out. Buying and selling, kind of that home shopping network feel for sports cards. Definitely check out Drip Marketplace. I will put links in the video description as well as in the pinned video comments. All right, guys, here it is. Roll it. Frank, I can't do this by myself. That's why Oh, woo. Okay. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a new 3-part series that we are calling Dinged Corners with Sports Card Dad and Sports Card Therapist, reminding you that there's no perfect way to collect. He's Dustin. I'm Rob. Dustin, what's going on, man? I'm excited for this. How you doing?
I've been looking forward to this all week, man. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing well, man. Doing well. So just, not that there's a huge backstory to us starting this 3-part series, but I think, I've definitely been a watcher of your content. You put out some great content and love the YouTube videos that you do, man. So it felt like there was, when we finally did connect, it felt like there was like a cool kind of mutual respect going on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I've been watching you for a while. I'm not a big podcast guy, so I like the fact that you've got the podcast, but you've got the YouTube part, because I'm really only zeroed in on YouTube. Sometimes I'll catch kind of like a podcast here and there, but I mean, for the most part, I'm a YouTube guy. So yeah, I've been watching your stuff for probably maybe since the beginning, 18 months or so. So yeah, I was excited that we were able to connect.
I appreciate that, man. And you've put out some great stuff that we're not going to touch on now because we're really only moving forward. But I'm sure, as we talk and as we continue, we might, glance in the rear view every now and then. But yeah, you had done a reaction video to one of my episodes, and that caused me to say, you know what, man, that is awesome. And I'm going to reach out. And from the moment we reached out, it was good conversation. And then we actually made plans to meet up at the Philly show a few weeks ago. Yep. And we missed each other. You actually saw my buddy Ken, Sports Card Lessons, and somehow you and I missed each other, even though we made the plans.
I know. And it was too bad too, because I was like, I need to message Rob, and the day just got away from me. I was only there Saturday, and then I was like meeting with different people, and then the show's over, and it's like, damn, I missed him.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. So today's episode, like I said, this is episode 1 of a 3-part series. So it's going to be 3 episodes in total here. And the topic of today is, why do we collect? And so Dustin, this is a joint episode. This is a 50-50 thing that we're doing, posting it on both of our channels, both of our networks. When you hear that, like collecting, why do we collect? What's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
So I actually thought about this for a little while, because I think there's obviously the nostalgia stuff and things that we've talked about, but I thought about it more from my perspective, and I was thinking, like, you know what, maybe for me, it's one thing that I can control in my life. Because I know, like, for you, we're both dads, we both have wives, so there's so many kind of unpredictable things that happen throughout the day. And of course, like health, as far as like family goes, we can't control that. We do our best for, lifestyle and everything, choices, but there's so many unpredictable things coming at us on a daily basis. Whereas the hobby, the sports card hobby, or any other hobby, collectibles type stuff, that's something that we control, what we collect, how we collect it. So for me, I was thinking like that might be like a bigger picture thing that I hadn't really put a lot of thought into before, as to like why, kind of the big why, as kind of part of that answer.
I love that, man. and I never really thought about it like that. Just how simply you put it. I'm sure I kind of skated around that concept before, but it's a selfish thing, and right, it's like, no, this is kind of my thing, and as we get older and as we turn into men and we
Yeah.
have
All the
children and we're
responsibilities.
married, everything is a we thing, everything's an us thing, right? Like
Yeah.
everything is kind of shared with family, as it should be, because everything's about the kids, everything's about the wife and stuff. And I think a big part of what I like to talk about for sure is self-care, and self-care means being selfish sometimes and having something that's just for us. So I love that you bring that up. That was the first thing you bring up. I love that.
Yeah, I think, and you kind of nailed it. You get into a zone where you have all these responsibilities, all these other people to think for and about, but you just want, especially as you age up. You and I are about the same age too. I think when you're 25, when you're 30, you're kind of going through these different phases of life. But then as you kind of age up, you're like, man, I just want something back that's just mine, that I have control over. And I think for us, that's probably part of it. And then of course, you go back and there's a bunch of nostalgic feelings tied into all of that as well. So it's a complex subject, I think.
Yeah. And, I know that our age bracket really makes up a big chunk of this hobby, and a big chunk of those individuals did come back right at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Because it was like, okay, how can I tap into what I love? How can I, it felt like the daily grind had kind of slowed down a little bit. There was really nowhere to go, not much to do. And you touched on it when you first started talking with nostalgia. I know for me, I mean, it just, man, nostalgia is such a driving force and a powerful thing in my collecting. And it brings me back to just when I was a kid, when I was a kid going to the card stores, and it brings me back to hanging out with my dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could say that my dad was a big collector and we had that in common, but he was supportive of it. And I can even remember, I can visualize it in my head, being in the back seat and having like a pack of 89 Pro Set football, looking for Barry Sanders rookies, and I'd open the pack and kind of shuffle through, and he'd be like, did you get anything good? I remember him saying that, like just kind of flashback,
Yeah.
so it is kind of tied to those happy memories for sure. Yeah.
I love how you bring up the 89 Pro Set. I remember the Barry Sanders like it was yesterday. It kind of had like the red border with the white stripes, right?
Yeah.
And then for me, I think hands down one of my favorite sets of all time. And really, I think probably one of my favorite years to collect was the 90 Pro Set, because it almost looked like it got a glow up. Like the set as a whole just kind of looked a little bit better. And that's when they had the Pro Bowl cards too, remember? So when someone played in the Pro Bowl, they had the Pro Bowl cards on top of that. But yeah, it felt like something so new and so much fun back then, because it was like, okay, I know I'm playing sports. I'm playing soccer as a kid. I'm playing football. Now there's these cards I can collect of people that I see on TV, and here we are 30 something years later, and we haven't evolved much.
I know. And I'm actually kind of impressed that young people are still kind of involved in the same way, maybe not in the same numbers as back then, because if you think back to kind of those days, there was a lot less distraction. There was a lot less kind of, there was no internet really to go on and be consumed with. And now, you still do have young people that are getting in, which to me is impressive, just based on that. Back then it was like you play sports, you collect cards or comic books or whatever your stuff is. It was just much more simple times. I think that's part of the nostalgia too, is that such a simpler time back then compared to where we are today.
Yeah. And so let me ask you something with the cards that you collected back then, right? I would imagine you had binders, right? The nine card binders and stuff, the pages. Did you ever put cards, whether if it was in top loaders or whether if it was in the 9-page sleeves, did you ever put cards in penny sleeves?
I think I did. That's a good question. I think that I did do the penny sleeve and the top loader. Maybe not for every card, and maybe not when I first started out. Maybe I kind of evolved into that because I was probably the hobby for me was like age 7 to maybe like 13, 14, and then it kind of puttered out for me as I was heading into high school and stuff. So I think when I was 7, probably no. But then as I kind of evolved a little bit, then I was doing the penny sleeves with the top loaders for like the really good cards.
Yeah. So I don't think I ever really used penny sleeves, even in top loaders. And I recently a couple years ago found my my shoebox, because that's what I used to keep all my cards in. My shoebox of Ken Griffey Jr. cards. I had like 200 of them. They were all in top loaders, not a single one in a penny sleeve. And
Wow.
I was like, yeah, I don't think I used penny sleeves back then. But then now it's like I bought some collections from people over the years, and even in like the nine card binder pages, they'll be penny sleeved in there, and I'm like, wow, these are
Yeah.
people that took care of their stuff.
Yeah, I definitely didn't put like painter's tape over the top. Like cards slid out. There was no coverage as far as that went.
Yeah. So, I think thinking about why it is that I collect now, and talking about that nostalgia factor, I think that when I think about the things I do on a day-to-day basis, I'm working, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, even getting together with other couples and other families and stuff. It's all pretty much adult stuff. It's almost like I've blinked and I went from being a 15-year-old sophomore to a 40-year-old bald dad,
Right. Yeah.
and there's just something about collecting that makes me feel young again. There's just something that gives me that energy, that kind of boost, that heart pumping kind of, I could feel my my juices flowing kind of feeling. It just gives me a feeling of being young again.
I wonder too how much so of course there are solitary collectors that are just focused on what they're doing. Maybe personality plays into this as well as far as each individual, but I wonder too how much of it is the camaraderie. Let's say you're a Ken Griffey Jr. collector, you come in, and let's face it, like when you're adults, it's hard. It becomes harder to make adult friends. We're all so busy. We have very limited time. You're very picky with how you're going to spend your time and who you're going to spend it with. So the idea that you're going to just add like 10 new friends is not easy as an adult unless you have common ground. And so if you're into this thing and you have other Ken Griffey Jr. collectors that oh man, we got this or we got that or whatever, and you're kind of comparing notes. And then even on a larger scale, it's just, oh, okay, there's 10,000 nerds in this building with me that do the same thing. That kind of, I feel like, I wonder how much of that really kind of keeps this going. Whereas if you were, now again, personality based, there's probably plenty of people that are perfectly fine just collecting like in their house, just ordering things online. But think about like you go to card shows, you're a dealer a lot. I haven't been a dealer at a show, but just attending a show, the rush, I mean, the day before I get the same kind of rush that I did when I was 10. Even though I might not have any game plan at all, but just the idea that you're going to go there and you're going to kind of, be doing this it's just really, really fun. And then I could see how on the dealer side, the excitement of like, okay, how am I going to price stuff? How am I going to like negotiate this? Am I going to hold on to this? What would I trade it for? All those things I think are great distractions. It's good stuff.
Dustin, let me tell you, man. I mean, you keep referencing Ken Griffey Jr. I know I brought him up, but you're continuing the references going, and the way you transitioned into talking about the community, it was as sweet as the kids swing. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, because you completely nailed that, man. Community is so big, and I know a huge part of the reason why I've stayed this time. I've talked about on my show before how I came back. I started buying cards again. I was about to say I came back into the hobby in 2010, but I think that would be a little misleading because I really just kind of dipped my toe back in. So around 2010, I started buying up a lot of player lots off eBay, and they were all the junk wax I remember buying as a kid. 89 pro set, 90 pro set. What remember the score insert? What was it? The Top Gun or Air Gun, the quarterback card?
Oh yeah.
I think it was Top Gun. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
it was the quarterbacks, and the Montana was like the chase card,
Yeah.
and so I started just buying up a ton of lots on eBay, like back in 2010. Started sleeving them up in my binders, and then, after a couple months, I literally put them under my bed. I literally put them under my bed. My wife and my mattress, our king size bed. I put it underneath our bed and forgot about them. And then in 2013, I got that itch again. It's like I've never fallen out of love with sports. I mean, I'm as much of a sports fanatic as anyone out there, anyone that's listening. So it's like
Yeah.
I got that itch again, but I found myself buying memorabilia. So I was buying a lot of signed 8x10s. I have my big Eli helmet I'm looking at right now that he signed. I was buying up a lot of memorabilia, but once that itch was kind of scratched, I kind of dipped back out again. And I think back and I'm like, well, what's been different this time? Like, why have I been back in this now going on 3 years and I'm more passionate than ever? And I really believe it's because of the community.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think even an extension of what you're talking about with the cards is we create hobby content. And you and I have talked about this. We have people that reach out like, hey, thinking about starting a podcast or a channel, and even just kind of sprucing up, like doing more on IG, which I'm not a huge IG person. I'm not, I need to learn. Actually, one of my daughters has got all these fancy tricks that she knows how to do now with her camera phone. So this afternoon, I'm getting a tutorial for my 10-year-old on how to make better shorts or whatever. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, the hobby content community is another separate faction and regardless of whatever type of content you want to make, but again, you'll create kind of a group that you like to interact with, or maybe people that watch the show that enjoy it and you have contact with them. And all of that is part of that ecosystem that kind of, keeps it going.
Yeah. And it's funny. And I think we've talked about, like, you know what? Yeah, I think this would make kind of a good match if we did a little series together, because you're primarily a YouTube guy, right? And I'm primarily podcast and Instagram. And I actually didn't start an actual Twitter until about 6 months ago. And I didn't start my YouTube page until I was about 50 episodes in. And then I just went back and just did like a mass upload of a bunch of my older episodes and slowly just started out my YouTube. And definitely starting the YouTube was huge for me, because I could see once I started the YouTube, I actually saw my podcast listens grow as well, the podcast stream. So it was like, okay, like this is translating into something, and really what it comes down to, right, is just like, I love the interactions with people. I love the interactions. And you and I were talking before we started recording, and I know for myself, and you agreed, but I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, but I put out so much of myself into this podcast that I have listeners or watchers, they come up to me and they just, they introduce themselves, say, hey man, what's up? Appreciate the content. And they, to an extent, feel like they know me, and they do. They know so much of me and who I am, and I've never seen them before. I've never met them before. So it is a different dynamic. But I remember when I was doing my roundtables a couple of months ago. I did like a month of roundtables, like 12 roundtables.
Yeah,
and
those are
and
great.
I did a content consumer roundtable. So it was basically just listeners, people that just like binge content. And there's a gentleman, Denny, and Denny's card, shout out to him. He said, Rob, like, you are who you hang with, right? Like, we all know you are who you hang with, and show me the 5 people that are in your circle, and that's who you are. He said, Rob, you didn't even know it, but you were my closest hobby friend for the last 6 months, and we had never met or never talked.
Yeah.
And I was like, just the way that he said it completely blew my mind.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I have similar stories to that as well, where especially when we were in the pandemic, there was folks reaching out like, hey man, I've been going through chemo and this is stuff that I listen to, not just me, but others as well.
Yeah.
You helped me through like a really weird time, in my life. There was a lot of, I mean, for a lot of people, the pandemic, there was loss of life, but there was also job loss. There was all sorts of trials during that time. And so, it's good to hear that you're just providing some sort of entertainment, some form of, information entertainment that could help, during that time. So, yeah, I totally agree. And with viewership, it's great because if you think back, like, I can't speak for you, but for me, I mean, in 89, 90, I was collecting like the 3 or 4 sets of basketball or baseball or football. And then I was out of it, then came back in 2018. Well, a lot happened in the hobby between 1993 and 2018. So a lot of times viewers help like, hey, have you looked into this set? Or, I saw that you're collecting this player. Have you ever seen this?
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's been like the whole documenting the journey part. It's been great because I've learned so much from people that have stayed in, or maybe they got back in 2013 or something or whatever. And so they're able to share, different cards and things because there's a zillion different cards out there. And obviously when you come back in, it's just a blank slate that you're trying to learn from. So yeah, viewership has been fantastic all the way around.
Yeah, and looking at it in terms of I know we're probably going to touch on some of the stuff in future episodes, but looking at some of the stuff that I collect, I really don't collect a ton of stuff from the years 90, 93 to like 2010. There's just not a lot I collect in between there, and I think, like you said, it's because I wasn't collecting then, even though I was a big sports fan then. There's just so much I don't know. And, like 90s inserts for basketball is such a huge thing, right? And there's
Yeah.
so much value there. Like some of these cards, some of these prices are just astronomical. I can't even wrap my head around some of them, whereas with a vintage card, I'm like, of course it's worth that. And
Yeah.
and the thing is, even though I didn't grow up in that vintage era, even though I might not have seen Mickey Mantle play, I still heard the stories. I still remember getting my Beckett price guide or my cards, or there was another price guide besides Beckett. I can't
Tough
remember.
stuff
Card stuff, right?
or tough stuff.
Tough stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it was a bit thicker, right? It was a bit thicker. Yep.
Yeah.
So, I could remember looking back and seeing those cards. I can remember looking back and seeing those cards and hearing the story. So for me, it was like, yeah. But when last year, when I started picking up some big John Stockton cards, just because I think he's undervalued, underappreciated, all those things, people were flooding my DMs with just really informative things about 90s inserts because that was Stockton's era. So I started getting like a 90s inserts 101 from listeners and from viewers just because I was talking about things that I was looking at and I was kind of walking through my thought process on things.
Yeah, when you talk about the Beckett magazine, the George Mikan rookie that you have behind you, I remember thinking, like, as a 10-year-old or 9-year-old kid, like looking all the way back in the price guide, like, when did these start? Like, what is the earliest card? And I remember the George Mikan picture being there. I don't know if it was the earliest one, but it was definitely one of the earliest. Is it 48 Bowman?
Yeah, 48 Bowman. Yep.
Okay, yeah, I just remember flipping back like, what? Because like in 1990, I didn't realize that there was like vintage cards. I actually didn't even really care. I was an 8-9-year-old kid, until you actually go to the card shop and then you see like, oh, okay, here's a Michael Jordan card from '86, and here's this Joe Montana card from '81. You have no understanding of any of it. So yeah, no, it's cool.
Yeah. And so that George Mikan card, I mean, crazy story about that. And just like, all these cards that we get, right? There's so many stories connected to these as well. So every card that I've ever acquired, there's a story, whether if it's a tiny story or a big, long, drawn out story, but the George Mikan card, I was at a show and I actually moved some cards that I really didn't want to move, but I said, you know what? I think like it's time. This guy's offering me cash, and he's offering me a lot of cash for these cards. And the time or two before that I've done, because really, listen, I'm a collector. I set up at shows. I set up at least 1 to 2 shows a month, but usually my bottom row in my case, that's like my PC stuff, and that's stuff that's basically not for sale unless someone just blows me away with an offer, right?
Right.
So he comes up and he's like, "Hey, I kind of like this card, this card, this card, that card," and he's like, "I got cash, like let's make a deal," and he did. So I ended up kind of taking a risk, and I said, "Yeah, you know what? I will move on from these cards. I've owned them for a while. Maybe it is time to move on." And so I get that cash, and immediately I remembered, holy crap, last night in a story sale on Instagram, someone posted a Mikan card. I've never seen a Mikan card posted on Instagram in a story sale before. And to even take it a step further, I had never seen a George Mikan 48 Bowman in person ever. I'm sure there was one at National in Chicago. I didn't see it though. I'm sure there was one in Atlantic City.
Yeah,
I didn't see it though. Maybe there wasn't, because on the PSA in total, on the PSA pop report, all grades, there's just over 300. So it's like,
oh, wow,
where are these cards? So I had remembered that someone had posted one in the story sale, and I actually messaged him the night before, and I said, "Hey, what's your price on that?" And he told me his price, and I was like, "Yeah, a little out of my price range. Would you accept partial trade?" He was like, "No, I'm just looking for cash." So totally get that. So when I'm at the show the next day and I get this guy that comes up to me and just basically drops $20K with me, like that, it was like, holy crap. And I didn't even think about it until I got home, and I got home and I go, oh my God, the guy with the mic in. Now he probably doesn't have that. I message him. He's like, yeah, I still got it. Boom. We agreed on a deal within like 30 seconds. And
wow.
And that's a card that I hope stays with me forever.
Yeah, that's just one where there's just not very many. I mean, when you go to the National, you see a lot of vintage baseball. I know you're a big vintage baseball card collector, and I'm not saying there's loads of Willie Mays rookie cards and stuff, but and I don't know. I'd have to look at the pop report for some.
Oh, there are. There's.
But you're right. You go to the National, you see 52 Topps Manos all over the place. You see the 51 Bowmans, but you don't see George Mikans. You don't see that card. So very cool. That's a great pickup.
And I think that's another reason why I collect, because first of all, I'm not going to call myself a history buff, because that would be an insult to people that are actually history buffs. So I'm not going to call myself a history buff, but I am someone that loves a good museum. If I go to a different country, I don't want to go on the boat ride, the catamaran. Like I want to go on a guided tour of the city, learning the history type thing.
You want to go to the Coliseum.
Exactly. Yep. So, I think a big part of why I collect is really because I feel like I'm playing a part in preserving history. I feel like by me collecting these vintage cards, and really I've just fallen head over heels passion for vintage, and I feel like I can never learn enough about the history of the game and the foundation of what everyone plays upon today. You know what I mean? Like today's game is really standing on the shoulders of these legends. And even if they're not legends, even if they only played one season or half a season in the majors, they still have laid the groundwork. So I have such an appreciation for the history, and by me learning about the players, learning about the history, learning about important sets like the 48 Bowman, like knowing that in basketball there was the 48 Bowman, and then there was nothing to the 57 Topps, then there was nothing till the 61 Fleer, and then nothing until the 69 Topps. So like knowing those things and being able to talk about those things openly on whatever content platform we have, I feel like I'm doing my part to the best of my ability to educate maybe the next generation on the history of these sports that we love.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great take. And yeah, I think that especially with vintage collectors, they're, looking at it, and I'm one of those. I'm not an only vintage person like you're not either, but you're collecting historical artifacts. It's like, important pieces of American history, really, if you look at it. I mean, and that's really what it is. Honus Wagner wasn't necessarily the best baseball player that ever played, not even close, really, but his tobacco card, the T206, there's a historical relevance that makes that card very expensive outside of his play, outside of his performance, on the field. So yeah, no, I think that's really, I think it's interesting. I also think it's good too, kind of how you had those cards. You had mentioned the cards that you ended up selling to get to that card. When you purchased those cards, you probably didn't purchase them with the thought of like, I'm going to move these cards soon. You probably thought, I could hold on to these for a long period of time, and then just as things progress, there's another card you're looking for. I think it's okay to, get into something and then move out of something to get into something else. As a collector, I know there's just diehard player collectors, maybe a Michael Jordan collector or something, like that's their guy and they're stuck with that particular guy. But you can also, I think, just do it. Well, first you can do it however you want to do it. That's the great thing about this. But also I think it's okay to be, a big time into something, and then, oh, you know what, I really want to get into this, or I have an opportunity to get a George Mikan. I never see them, and I actually have an opportunity to get into one. I can move these cards to get into it. So I think that also with sometimes that can be a little bit taboo, where it's like, oh, you're collecting this, but oh, now you're selling that. Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on what opportunities arise. I mean, there could be an opportunity for a 52 Topps Mantle, and that's a card maybe that you never thought that you would get into, but there's just some random opportunity, and you don't have necessarily six figures in the bank, but you do have a lot of cards you could help kind of move into it. So I think that's part of the fun, though, in listening to people as they're kind of on their journey, because there's all these twists and turns, and we're all going to have a different journey. We're all not going to have the same one. So yeah, I think that's part of the fun.
Listen, man, you hit on so many points there. Okay. I'm going to try to keep it brief because I know we're running out of time here for episode 1. But yeah, I mean, and I think that's a cool part of, us having our main PCs. And we're going to talk about, our PC pyramids in the next episodes. But, we have our main PCs, but then we can branch off and have our little side PCs, because, and typically our side PCs are going to be a lot less expensive. They're going to be more inexpensive, and but hopefully it still touches on the same kind of nostalgia that our main PC touches on. And I know for me, sometimes my side PCs will be cards that I just really, really want for either nostalgia purposes, or I just think it's super, super cool. And I realize that this card probably long term won't hold a ton of value. So as if I can get into it for like a good price, like if I'm going to buy a $20 card, chances are a $20 card will always be a $20 card.
Right.
So if I'm going to buy a $20 card, but it does fill this kind of void within my side PC, or it allows me to scratch an itch, so maybe I don't go out and drop money I don't have on a bigger card, then you know what, I'm going to do that. And it is cool to see people's collections that are different, right? Because
Absolutely,
yeah, it don't get me wrong, it's really cool when someone brings their Zion case, or you walk up to a case and there's 10 Josh Allen RPAs, 10 Justin Herberts, a bunch of LaMelo Ball. It's like, okay, cool. What? Okay, see you later. It's like, and I'm not knocking that, but to me, that I know those cards are usually going to be in people's hands strictly to move. And I love being able to see people's like low end, like $10 cards, $20 cards that they PC, and that makes up a really cool, unique collection that I've never seen before. That's the kind of stuff that I'll leave a show like, oh my God, did you see those music cards that they had? He had a Whitney Houston PSA 9. I mean, I don't even know what that I can't imagine it goes for much, or even an SGC 7 Puff Daddy rookie. Like that is so cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And usually too, especially with what you're talking about, there's obscure sets that you would have never known about if you hadn't seen that, if they hadn't shared that with you. So yeah, no, I completely agree. It's cool to, just to kind of learn as you go, and that's part of the, I think that's just part of the excitement of going to a show too. I know you had kind of hit on this, but you never know what you're going to see. You really have no idea. And there's bound to be cards that you've never seen before. There's going to be the Josh Allens and the Herberts and the John Morants and that sort of stuff, of course. But, there'll always be some obscure thing where you're like, what the heck is that? And then it starts a conversation with that dealer, that collector, and then maybe you can build off of that. That's a new hobby friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dustin, man, it has been a pleasure doing this. Dinged Corners, it's our 3-part series. Love the name, by the way. You and I were bouncing names off one another, and I don't know if you've had that in the back pocket for a while or if you just came up with it, but when you said Dinged Corners, I thought, like, yeah, man, there's no perfect way to collect. There's no Gem Mint 10 way to collect.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, I just kind of pulled that out. I was thinking about corners, and you had mentioned one, actually. Rounded corners was an option. We went with something a little bit more. I don't know. What's the word for like dinged compared to rounded? I guess.
Well, see, I thought rounded corners because I had that vintage mindset. So
Yeah.
We'll take rounded corners all day.
Absolutely.
If it has good centering, so that's where I was thinking. I think I said rounded corners, soft corners. Like I was thinking of stuff like that, and you were like, no, dinged corners. I was like, yes.
Hey, rounded corners have not been trimmed. That's the thing. That's what we look for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dustin, man, listen, it has been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to dropping episode 2 next week with you, man. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, thanks for having me. I mean, I feel like this is a long time coming, so I'm happy to get the first episode down and hopefully many more to come.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is a 50-50 thing, man. So I'm excited to see where it goes. And Dustin, man, it was a pleasure.
All right, dude. Thanks for having me.